Tonight on Talking Point, the vote, is your Central Provident Fund or CPF enough to retire on? If you're worried about your twilight years, start calling, tweeting, or posting your comments on Facebook. We want to hear from you. It's Talking Point, the vote. Good evening, everybody. I'm Daniel Martin, and you're watching Talking Point, the vote. Thanks for joining us. Now, if you're a young Singaporean entering the workforce today, you will have enough savings in your Central Provident Fund or CPF to finance your retirement. So says a recent study commissioned by the Singapore Ministry of Manpower. But there are certain assumptions. What are they? And are they realistic? How do we ensure we have enough CPF to retire on? Let us know what you think. You can start calling us at 66910028, or you can post your comments on Talking Point's Facebook page and tweet us at TPVote. Start doing that right now. We'll get to your calls and your comments very soon. But let me take this opportunity to introduce our guests joining us on the panel. On my left, which are on the right of your screens, I should say, Dr. Hui Weng Tat. He's an associate professor from the Lee Kuan Yew School of Public Policy. In the center of your screens, Associate Professor Kalyani Mehta, the head of the Gerontology program at the Singapore Institute of Management. And on the extreme left, we have Mr. Koh Chi Kok. He's the Vice President of FPAS. Our poll question for today, which I want all of you to start thinking about and start voting on, is: do you think you can retire on your CPF savings? Now, the poll has been running. Let's go to the figures right now and see where we stand. 42.9% are saying yes. 57.1% right now are saying no. So slightly more people don't think they'll have enough to retire on in terms of CPF savings. We'll see where that figure goes throughout the entire discussion. Very quickly, Dr. Hui, why do you think more people are saying no right now?
Well, because of the increased leakages from CPF, especially because of the housing price increase, escalating property prices, and this has led to increased withdrawal from CPF. Just to illustrate, for the last 30 years, median wages has increased by 3 to 5 times, sorry. But the prices of new HDB apartments has increased by 8 to 9 times. So there is increased withdrawal for housing, and that has resulted in reduction.
Do you think Singaporeans are feeling more and more that it's very expensive? It's getting too expensive to live?
Certainly so.
Yeah.
Yes.
All right, let me ask you the poll question. Do you think, can we retire on our CPF? Yes or no? Where do you lie?
Both yes and no. Yes, if all the savings that is in CPF stays where it is and the person continues to work to 65 years. No, because of the preoccupation with housing and housing purchases in Singapore.
That seems to be the big determining factor.
That's right.
Okay. Let me come to Associate Professor Kalyani Mehta. Kalyani, what do you think? Can we retire on our CPF alone?
I think a lot depends on which income class you belong to. And also, I think going forward, what kind of health you have, because quite a lot of our savings is spent on health. I also think that young people today, if we look at their preferences, I think their aspirations are high, hence the assumptions in the study about buying housing prudently may not really be realistic.
Yes, this came up in some discussions. My definition of prudent might be very different from my peer, just based on very certain similar criteria, interestingly enough. Healthcare is a big issue, which we want to talk about more as well in a minute. Thank you very much. Let's come to Mr. Koh Chi Kok, Vice President of FPAS. Chi Kok, can we retire on CPF?
The report basically based on 3 caveats. One is that this person is 25 years old and start working with salary of 2005. So this report, if based on those criteria, are correct. But the truth of the matter is most people doesn't buy or purchase item based on needs, but they base it on wants and desire, their lifestyle. So you would tweak this report. So is it enough or not? Basically it's based on their own expectation. What do they procure or purchase for their life?
It sounds like from all three of you all have mentioned one important thing. Does this really reflect reality and the aspirations, the choices that people make? I want to hear from you, our listeners, as well, our viewers, I should say, I beg your pardon. Let's talk a little bit about maybe the planning that you have done. I'm sure you've worked out your finances and your funds. Do you have a plan? Do you think you have enough CPF to retire on? Or in the reality of what you're buying in terms of purchases and whatnot, is there something lacking? You know, there was a retirement adequacy study in April this year. That's where the Singapore Ministry actually looked at, commissioned 2 professors from the National University of Singapore to examine whether the CPF can provide adequate retirement savings for a young Singaporean joining the workforce today. I must stress that, joining the workforce in 2012 today. Here is a quick summary of its findings.
Working Singaporeans will have enough savings in their Central Provident Fund or CPF to retire. That is, if they follow these assumptions to a T. Let's take a man and a woman. He starts work at 25 and she at 23. 5 years later, they get married. They buy a built-to-order flat from the government, which they pay for using CPF. The study assumes our couple will live in the same flat all their lives. Once they reach 55, they set aside a minimum sum from their CPF to invest in the CPF Life scheme. This gives them a regular payout after they retire. Let's assume our couple works till they're 65. They then live off their CPF savings for the rest of their lives.
Well, as you can see, the study was based on a few big assumptions. Firstly, that 2 young Singaporeans of opposite gender get married and then they purchase a BTO flat. The study also assumes that the couple would buy a flat within their financial means. For example, if based on their income level they were the 30th percentile of their cohort, they would have to buy a 3-room flat. A lot of assumptions there as well. Chika, let me come to you. One of the first assumptions that we saw in that video is that you graduate at a certain age, you'll be earning $2,500 a month. That was a point of contention for you. I mean, in reality, you say, how likely is that could necessarily happen?
Correct. So my question is that, is this report for the average Singaporean of it, or just for certain portion of the population? How many, to be 25 and drawing 2,500 per month, you likely will have to be a graduate, a diploma or degree holder. That's point number 1. And the report basically says that when you get married at age 30, both have to be Singaporean, and love is blind at times. You don't pick a Singaporean to get married. And it also mentioned that at that percentile, you would actually buy a 4-room. The truth is that how many of our peers actually buy a 4-room? So when this assumption are being, when they go beyond this assumption, they purchase what they want instead of per the guideline, the CPF adequacy will be thrown out of the formula.
It could be quite easy to step out of that
Correct.
formula, actually. And I mean, like you said, I mean, 40% of marriages we know are with non-Singaporeans in Singapore, according to some figures. Dr. Hui, kids were not mentioned as well either. You're going to live in a 3-room flat for your whole life, and your expanding brood is going to be there as well. What's going to happen with the kids factor?
Well, I think the study underestimates the housing aspirations of Singaporeans. For example, I think most young Singaporeans will want to maximize the usage of the CPF contribution to get the largest HDB unit possible.
From the get-go?
From the get-go, if they can, rather than to buy a 3-room. In addition to that, in addition to what Mr. Kaur has said, I think the study is based on several questionable assumptions that can lead to very misleading conclusions, among which is the rate of growth of the median wages. There's no progression of earning capacity, there's overestimation of the CPF contribution, and there's underestimation of the prices of CPF.
So do you think we could use this study to assuage concerns?
Provided the assumptions are made clear and people understand what assumptions are made. For example, if we look at the median wage growth, the study assumes that median wage growth is going to grow by 1.4%, which means that median wages is going to grow by 15% over 10 years. Now, this is against the declared official policy, which Minister Tharman has already announced in 2011 budget, that median wages is going to increase by 30% in the decade. So we are underestimating the wage of the growth of median wages. We are also assuming that there's no progression of earning capacity. A person enters the workforce at the median wage, he continues to remain within the median wage until he retires.
Yes.
Now, we know that this is not true. This is a very rigid assumption. A person moves from one earning band to another over the wage distribution. And another assumption that, a very odd assumption is that a person enters the workforce at age 25 and at retirement at age 65, he earns less than he earns at age 25,
yes.
which again is contrary to what we know, in terms of the extension of retirement age, in terms of the emphasis on training, retraining, which will ensure that a person, after working at least 30 years in the workforce, is bound to earn more than what he earns.
What would be a more realistic portrayal, in your opinion?
Well, a more realistic portrayal will be to look at what actually the person would earn over his lifespan, meaning that he will enter the workforce at $2,500, but he will progressively earn more and more. He move up the wage distribution.
Okay.
We will also have to look at a realistic picture of what HDB prices are.
Yes.
The assumption made in the report is that HDB prices is purchased in 2017, and if you work backwards, you find that the prices that is assumed ranges from $116,000 for a three-bedroom HDB apartment in 2012 prices, up to $266,000 for five-room HDB apartment. And we know that this is at least $80,000 less than what the current HDB prices are.
Yeah. So those assumptions, are they taking into account reality? There's this issue of prudency as well. Kayane, I'll come to you that in just a moment, but we're going to go for a break right now. But before we do, I want to bring you back to our poll, because the studies, the figures that on our poll have jumped quite significantly. When we started off, over 50% were saying that no, we don't have enough enough to retire on in terms of CPF savings. Right now, 82.9% are saying no. When we ask the question, do you think you can retire on your CPF savings? Maybe in our opening preamble, we have convinced a few more people, I wonder. 16.7% saying yes, keep those votes coming in. Later on in the show, we'll be talking to Dr. Wei about a study that he conducted as well, looking at this very same issue. Do you have enough to retire on in terms of CPF savings? We'll continue on Talking Point to vote. Welcome back to Talking Point, the vote. We're discussing whether our CPF savings are enough for us to retire on. Keep calling us at 669-10028. I know many of you have been calling in with concerns and worries about whether or not you will have enough to retire on, and some of you are seeking advice as well. We'll speak to you very soon. Let's go straight back to our poll right now. The question was, do you think you can retire on your CPF savings? 87% are saying no, 13% are now saying yes. A recent study done by the Singapore Ministry of Manpower made use of an internationally recognized measure of retirement adequacy. It's known as the income replacement rate, or the IRR. Well, the IRR also is a yardstick used by economists worldwide to gauge how retirement adequate social security systems are. Here's a look at how it is calculated.
The IRR measures whether you can maintain your current standard of living after retirement. This is how it is calculated. First, take your net retirement income. That's the monthly payouts you get from your CPF life annuity plan. Next, take your net pre-retirement earnings. That's your income at 55, after deducting for CPF contribution and income tax. Divide the two, and that's the income replacement rate, or IRR. A higher percentage means the more you have for retirement. According to this report, a median income male will have an IRR of 70. That means his CPF payout will be 70% of what he used to earn. For a median income female, it's 64%. That's well within the 53 to 78% target of the World Bank. Low-wage workers in Singapore will get an additional boost in their retirement savings because of financial assistance from the government.
Now, according to that study, of course, that recent study under the Adequacy of Retirement Income Sub-Index, in that study, Singapore's net income replacement rate is particularly low. Why is that so? This is despite the fact that we have one of the highest contribution rates in the world. So we're contributing a lot, but maybe the IRR is not reflecting that. Prof. Wee, what do you think? Do you think that this survey is an adequate reflection?
No, I think the computation in the MOM report overestimate the IRR. According to my own estimation, the IRR is less than what is reported. It's actually less than, for the high income group, those who are earning 2,500 and above per month, the IRR is actually less than 60%.
And the Mercer study also had a rather low figure.
Yes, I think it has to do with the assumptions made in the report, because the report assumes that your wages is not growing as fast as what it should be, and therefore at the point of retirement at 55, your wages is actually artificially depressed. And therefore when you take your retirement income as a percentage of your pre-retirement earnings, you tend to have a higher IRR, because the IRR is a percentage of your last drawn pay by definition. Actually, it should not be at 55 because we are looking at retirement age at 65, and so it should be the wage of a person at 65.
I want to talk to you more about the findings of your study in just a moment. Kalyani, one of the big assumptions of the study has been this idea of prudency and living prudently. Your views on that, and whether or not this factor of IRR, whether we have enough to retire on, taking into account that, prudency is quite different from person to person.
Exactly. I think the whole concept of prudency has to be looked at carefully, because when we want to retire, for example, myself, when I want to retire, I want to have the same quality of life that I've led for the last perhaps 10 to 20 years.
And it's quite reasonable for most people to expect that.
Exactly. So vacations are part of it. Having a car to bring me around is part of it. No doubt I could use the public transport, but then don't forget I'll be getting older, and so perhaps I would like to continue using my car. The other things, like for example, medical costs will go up. So one has to factor that in very carefully, whether the MediSave that we have saved is enough
Someone
to carry
often
us
say you need
through.
much more.
Exactly. We probably need a lot more. And I think this is why Singaporeans tend to be very insecure. Even if they have a sizable amount in their CPF account, they still feel very insecure, because they say, if I have a couple of operations, all my savings will be wiped
Let's
out.
say about a chronic disease that requires monthly treatment, there it goes as well.
Exactly. You
Okay.
can't use much of your CPF.
You know,
for
I'm hearing
chronic
from
disease.
producers that a lot of our callers are calling through with the same concerns. Will I have enough, even if I have enough as well? Let's go to the phone lines right now, where Lawrence is standing by at 6691-0028. Lawrence, how are you, sir? Lawrence, are you there?
Yeah, I'm speaking here.
Thank you very much for joining
I
us.
want to say that regarding the age of 65, do you think you can retire on the CPF saving? I should probably say yes, because why? You cannot predict life in this world. Be honest with you, you cannot predict life in this world.
Yes.
Because anytime I might leave the world. So presently I have about 60,000 in my CPF retirement account. So monthly I'm getting from my retirement account is about $390. So if what happened to me, if I am disability, or maybe if I am not acceptable by the presently company to work in its company, because right nowadays the government wants Chinaman as a driver. Be honest with you, I have that to say that.
We're facing difficulty. I understand that, Lawrence.
Yes,
But
I
Lawrence,
agree
let me ask you something. You're 65.
Yes,
Are you worried about whether you have enough in the next few years?
yes, true. Be honest, upon the Lord, I said yes, I'm honest. Because
Thank you.
I cannot predict life.
Yours is a comment that has been echoed by many of our viewers as well, and a lot of tweets are coming in. I want to go to our Twitter page. Wendell Lowe is sent a tweet to TP Vote. It says, I think the assumption that a couple does not move to different flats at all in their lives is a tad too conservative. That's another one of the preconditions that was in that initial study. Thank you, Wendell. We've got Mr. Tan standing by on the phone line as well. Mr. Tan, hello.
Hello, good evening. How are you?
Very well, thank you. I'm also concerned about my CPF. How about you?
But I really have only left 10,000. I now at my age now is 56. How can I have enough to live on for the past? I don't know how to live. Only $10,000 inside the CPF. Can you help me with this problem?
Some advice, maybe. Chico, I'd love to come to you for some advice to Mr. Tan. Thank you for your call, sir. Any suggestions for... I'm sure there are many people in Mr. Tan's situation where they reach their 50s and I've got this figure and that's it. How can I survive on this?
Okay, I think this report is basically for a certain category of people. It was being done on a basis, and if I were to say that it would be for young people who start planning now based on CPF, if they go by the rules, it would be sufficient.
Okay. But what about somebody
But
already
they need to look at three things. Number one is to make sure that they are properly protected, buying medical insurance, health insurance. They need to make sure that their wealth are properly preserved and don't speculate in property, stocks and shares, etc. And the third thing is they got to manage their expectation and lifestyle. But again, like what Kalyani said, if you are so prudent, there's no fun.
Right, no, but my point is, what about somebody already
so
in
for
Mr.
somebody
Tan's case?
who, like in Mr. Tan's case, my suggestion is that one of the first line is to go on the defense. Look at whether could you buy certain things to protect yourself, and one of the best thing to look at is what kind of insurance can you buy to protect yourself, because financial consultants are not magicians.
No.
They got to base on what you have, what you need, and they got to build from there. If you're left with 10,000 in your CPF, you got to look at how you are going to stretch it.
Kalyani, what do you advise
I would
elderly who
like
might
to ask
find
Mr. Tan whether he has any adult children.
Unfortunately, we don't have Mr. Tan with us anymore, but let's say he does.
I think that is one of the, you can say, streams of income from your children whom you have sacrificed for, given them an education and so on. If, for example, Mr. Tan doesn't have children, but he has a spouse with him who is also working, then perhaps both of them can still eke out a living. But I think Mr. Tan's issue is not uncommon.
No.
There are many people in that same boat, and CPF for many years has not covered people who are daily waged. There are people outside the CPF system who are unable to support themselves through retirement. And don't forget, in future people may live to 100. We don't know how long we're going to live, because after 65 it could be 30 years.
Like Lauren said, anything can happen. Life's unpredictable. But I must ask you, I mean, when you work with groups of elderly individuals, I'm sure, I mean, in today's day and age, let's say not outside of the study, I'm sure many of them are saying, how am I going to live 15, 20 years? Because that's how long I think I will be living with this very minimal sum. How do you advise them? What are their options?
Well, we discuss with them where their savings are, the first thing. Secondly, we also discuss with them where the resources are in society that they could tap. Sometimes there are services that they could tap, but they don't know about those services. There could be ComCare, or there could be other kinds of financial aid. But this financial aid should be seen only as a temporary, perhaps, bandage, until such time as the person is able to have a longer term source of income.
For many people, it could be day to day, month to month.
Yes.
In many cases. I've got to take a phone call right now, though, unfortunately. Let's go to the phones at 669-10028, where we've got now next caller standing by. Jasmine joins us. Hi, Jasmine.
Yes, the reason I have three suggestions to hedge against three variables to ensure that your CPF is enough to last you. One is your job, whether your skill sets are relevant at 65 or at 55. Next is your health that could render you unable to work beyond 55. And third, major expenditure from your parents' poor health that drains your MediSave, which require top up from other accounts. So what I did for myself is I had bought endowment policies that mature at 40 in case the security of a job is not there because of restructuring of your industry you're working with, and at 59 or at 55. Then I bought the money to come out so that before the CPF drawdowns at 65, you have chunks of money coming out at these two critical stages of your life.
Is this what worked for you? I understand that you are in your 60s and you were able to retire early. I beg your pardon, in your late 50s.
I'm at 56. I retired early 7 years ago.
And you were able to retire early because of this.
Because I planned ahead that I saw a lot of my colleagues who are caught in such a situation where their CPF could not outlast the drain from the parents, the in-laws starting falling sick when they're in their 50s.
How early did you start?
I started saving.
Jasmine, are you still there?
Yeah. I started putting aside in the late 20s and early 30s.
Okay, late 20s, early 30s, and you were already concerned by that stage.
Yeah, and also the health issue is you must make sure your life policies is all the premium no longer need to be paid at 55. That means you do not carry the burden if you cannot have a job.
I'm very impressed, Jasmine. It sounds like
in advance.
It sounds like you've planned and really worked it out, and that you're reaping the benefits of that today. Jasmine, thank you for sharing your experience with us. we had somebody else share her view with us. Felicia Huang tweeted us at TP Vote, and Felicia says, my Korean friends are extremely impressed and envious of our CPF savings because they are buying a lot more insurance for their retirement. So just like Jasmine was able to plan those 2 or 3 issues, Felicia's Korean friends are perhaps spending a lot more on insurance just to retire on that situation. One thing that was brought up, Dr. Hui, if I could just very quickly come to you before we go for our break, this issue of the sandwich generation. Jasmine brought up the idea of, you're supporting your family, drawing down from your medical bills. In your study, did you take that into account, that class of people, the sandwich generation?
Not really, but going forward, I think if property prices continue to maintain the trend it's going, then increasingly you'll find that to finance the property purchase, it will require not only the current CPF contributors, but it may have to go beyond to the next generation. So the earlier generation have a better life in the sense that property prices were much lower, and therefore you are able to save more for your retirement. But going forward, I think it will become more difficult for the next generation.
And if you're part of that sandwich generation, that sandwich class, are you worried about that as well? We want to hear from you at 6691-0028. Just a quick look at our poll. This is one of the strongest skews I've seen. Do you think you can retire on your CPF savings? 93.3% are saying no. 6.7% are now saying yes. That's a strong majority favoring the no. We're going to find out more when we continue on Talking Point the Vote. Stay with us. Welcome back to Talking Point the Vote. We're talking about having enough to live out your golden years. How do we make sure we have enough Central Provident Fund or CPF savings when we retire? A recent study concluded that Singaporeans would have adequate savings for retirement provided they lived prudently, which means buying an HDB BTO flat together with their spouse and having a certain income level for the rest of their life. A lot of people have called in and tweeted, and we've talked about it, whether or not that is realistic and whether or not that can assuage your fears. And based on our poll, many people still do seem to feel the answer is no. Do you think you can retire on your CPF savings was our question, or is our question for today. 93.2% now say no, and 6.8% now say yes. We're also getting a lot of calls from people who are concerned and expressing what we're seeing on the poll. Do I have enough? I don't think I have enough. That's what a lot of people are saying. And we're hearing from people in their 20s, 30s, 40s, and 50s. Let me come to the panel. I mean, we have to start addressing these fears. People are fearful about retirement. Kalyani, is this a real fear? Is there something that we can do? Why are people feeling this fearful?
I think there is a psychological aspect to it because you can't see your CPF money. It is sort of invisible, and a large part of it you can't touch. I know of a friend who had medical bills he couldn't pay. He said, if only I could use my CPF money to pay my medical bills, medicines that he had to take, but he just didn't have money, so he came to borrow some money. And he said, when my CPF comes through, then I will pay you back. So there are people who are stuck in that kind of situation. The other kind of situation is that in the sandwich generation, a lot of people are supporting their parents.
Yes.
And the medical bills of their parents are also quite high. And even though they may be sharing as siblings, it's still quite a big chunk. So I think caregiving is one area which the study did not address. And I think caring for parents, singles especially, in one focus group that I conducted, the single individuals in the focus group were pretty depressed and very concerned that they had done their best for their parents, but they had no next generation to depend on to do something similar.
Please add me to your focus group, because that would be me right now. Chikot, let me come to you. I mean, there is this belief, and maybe it was something from the 70s and 80s or the previous generation, that your CPF would be enough. There was this fallacy or this misunderstanding that I've got the CPF, I'm putting aside this much of my money every year, when I hit 55, I'm fine. Does that still exist? I mean, so many people, like we said in the last segment, they are reaching 49, 50, and they're saying, whoa, hang on a minute, I'm not going to have enough.
I think part of it is over the years the prices of housing has escalated.
Yes.
The price of a car have definitely escalated. So some of this we thought it is enough is no longer relevant. Okay, and I would think that it's always good, like Jasmine, the caller Jasmine, she planned ahead and she's living her life.
She's retired early.
Yeah, and that's good. And like Mr. Tan, it's never too late to plan, but you need to look at your expenses, your savings, and would you be able to find another job to create another source of income, regardless of big or small.
Mr. Cole, what about inflation?
Inflation is something that, again, you have to manage your expectation. Like you're saying that I can have a car, but do you need the car that you used to drive when you're working, when you're 40s and 50s? Or could you use a smaller car, a hybrid, or even a diesel engine?
Okay, making yourself a bit, but should we as Singaporeans just have a mindset now that when you retire, I should expect a decreased quality of life, and that is just the way it is?
No, I don't think when you retire, you need to compromise your lifestyle. If you plan ahead, and it's never too late to plan, it's never too early to plan.
Also, but some of the things that you brought up, Kalyani, I want to come on to with Dr. Wee in just a minute, this idea of sometimes it's this locked-in invisible money. Other things can decrease quality of life, like medical bills that you can't pay for, like the stress of having to deal with knowing that you have this invisible money that you can't touch sometimes. Let me go to our phone lines right now, where I do believe Hazel has called through at 669-10028. Hi, Hazel.
Oh, hello.
Thank you for calling us. What's your question or comment?
Okay. Currently, I felt that CPF at this moment is more than enough, really more than enough, because I felt that...
How old are you right now, Hazel, may I ask?
Sorry?
How old are you, if I may ask?
I'm 39 this year.
Okay.
So basically, I felt that CPF currently is enough and more than enough, because with the interest giving at about 3 to 4%, it is actually higher than the bank. And honestly speaking, I felt that as Singaporeans, we don't just depend on CPF alone. We do have our own savings, which is tangible. Then we have our investments. Then we have our forms of all the different insurance. So I think as a normal Singaporeans, if we are not the very lavish type, just the basic where we have a job, we have insurance, and we just doesn't need to live a lavish lifestyle.
So what are you expecting after retirement, Jasmine? Hazel, I beg your pardon. What are you expecting after retirement? Is there going to be a different quality of life altogether?
Oh, okay. Talking about quality of life, I felt that there's no need to compromise the quality of life. But I think it's not only quality, but also the quantity. Because now as we are young, we tend to spend more. You would like to spend on a house, okay, house exclusive, but like a car, or you want to spend on luxury goods, you go for holidays.
Or your children's education, which can be a lot. Or your children's education, which can be a lot for some people as well.
Yeah, correct. So actually currently, even if you pay for your children's education, you still have to pay upfront cash, right? And even for CPF itself, you probably can only finance them through the tertiary education.
So Hazel, what you're saying is with the proper planning, you think it's more than enough and it's manageable if we amend our expectations a little bit.
Yes. And I believe that our government won't give us one lump sum at one go. They will give us an annuity that is a bit by bit. So in that case, if that's the policy, it will only complement what we actually have in our retirement.
Understood. Thank you very much. So far, what I'm being told, Hazel, is you're one of the few optimistic people that have called through. So thank you for sharing that view with us. Let's go back to our poll and where it stands right now. 94.6% saying no. Do you think you can retire in your CPF savings? 5.4% saying yes. Dr. Wee, something that Hazel mentioned, let's not just look at CPF as the only form of retirement as savings. Is that something that you agree with?
Yes, certainly. I think the key to financial adequacy in retirement is sound planning. I think in the case of Hazel, she has done the proper homework and she's been able to plan ahead. But not many people do that. They only look to the present, and they would want the biggest house possible and to spend the money on the car or other expenditure. And I think for the young especially, I mean, these days you find that young people tend to go on holidays more often than what we used to do when we were young.
The budget airlines.
Yes, the budget is contributing to that, and you find therefore that they don't think about their future as much as the previous generation does.
It's interesting you're talking about different, the young versus the old as well. Dylan tweeted us and said only those high income earners can retire in the CPF savings, not the average income earners. What do you think?
Again, it goes back to the definition of retirement adequacy. It's about preserving the standard of living when you were working, just before you stop working. So for a person who is earning a low wage, and he or she would have had a certain standard of living that a person got used to, and so in retirement, if you are able to sustain that, then we say that you are able to sustain you have achieved retirement adequacy. For a high-income person, therefore, CPF by itself is not sufficient, but that person would have other savings besides CPF to make up for the shortfall.
So the average income earner is not out of that.
The average income earner, if you're looking at the median person, then according to my calculations, is not enough.
All right.
Because of the housing purchase and high property prices that drains a lot out from the CPF.
If it's not enough, in the next segment I want to come to you and say what else more needs to be done for that average income earner, which I'm sure many of us are falling into that bracket as well. We want to get your views when we continue, and we want you to keep voting as well at channelnewsasia.com/TP. One last look before we go for our short break right now on where the poll stands. Do you think you can retire on your CPF savings? Figure stands at 94.6% saying no, 5.4%, well now 5.1% saying yes, 94.9% saying no. The number just keeps rising higher. We're going to continue finding out more on Talking Point The Vote when we continue. Stay with us. You're watching Talking Point The Vote. We're discussing whether you have enough money for your retirement. Lots of views here on the panel, and we want to share them with you, and we want you to share your views with us by calling 669-1028. Don't forget to vote on our live poll at channelnewsasia.com/TP. Let's go to that poll right now, which keeps updating and keeps going up, by the way, I should say. Do you think you can retire on your CPF savings? 95.4% are saying no. 4.6% are now saying yes. Okay, that figure is changing and rising significantly. It started off at 50% at the beginning of the show, and now in the high 90 percentile as well. What must be done to allay the fears of Singaporeans? That's one thing we're going to deal with right now. Dr. Wee, one of the things that I left off in the last segment is coming to you. You said that, for that middle group of people, the middle income, the average income earners, CPF's not going to be enough. What must be done?
Well, there are certain changes that I think the policy makers can make to the current CPF system. One of these is a CPF contribution ceiling. This is the income level beyond which CPF contributions is not necessary. Currently, it stands at 5,000. Now, in the MOM report, it assumes that that ceiling is going to increase by about 1.6% every year in real terms. This means that in 5 years, you would expect the CPF ceiling to be raised by $1,000 every 5 years. Now, if you look at the history of the CPF ceiling, it has been declining over the last 30 years. So moving forward, if this comes true, if the CPF ceiling is going to be increased by $1,000 every 5 years, then we are going to see an increase in the adequacy of your savings in terms of the returns, in terms of the amount that you get at the end, and this is going to help the middle income group.
For those countries that do have a good IRR, why do they have it and why don't we?
Well, I guess it has to do with the amount that is leaked out of the system. In the case of Singapore, the CPF system, there's increasing access to the savings that you can tap on.
For housing,
for education, for medical, and so on. And this tends to drain the amount that you have left. And so the amount that's left is smaller than what you expect. And so people tend to plan short-term or do not see long-term, do not see far into the future enough. And so I think there's a need for them to take account of what would happen if they were to withdraw all this and see what happens to the end at the retirement age.
So what kind of policy change would you most like to see?
Okay, one is the increase in CPF contribution ceiling. Secondly is to increase the rate of return on CPF savings.
Currently, that's quite high already.
Currently it's 2.5% for OA, ordinary account. If that goes up by 1%, then that would add significantly to retirement adequacy.
All right, so those two changes, Dr. Hui. Kalyani, what would you like to see to help allay some of people's fears and concerns? What changes should we do?
There are a few things I would like to see. Firstly, I would like the contribution rates of the employer to go up for those workers between 50 to 65. I think by depressing the contribution rate, the logic or argument made is that it is made so that the employer will find the older workers more attractive.
Yes.
But really, it is ageism. And I call it ageism because you are devaluing the worker beyond 50 years. So if that rate could go up, there would automatically be more available in retirement. Secondly, I would say that CPF gives very basic allowance in old age, and everyone has to prepare for their own retirement and put aside money that they think will carry them for the next 30 years after 65. And
that's where the financial literacy and the planning early has to start for the generation that is from day one.
Yes, right. Even in schools. I think in secondary school, in JC, we should have a subject called financial planning.
Oh, wow. Okay, sounds like a good idea. That's one change. Well, we have to go to a quick phone call right now. 669-10028. Shirley is on the line right now. Shirley, hello. Hi, good to hear from you. What is your view, Shirley?
Okay, my opinion is that CPF will not last us through our retirement.
Why so?
And I think it's because of the rate of return if we were to put into our CPF system. As in the rate of return for the CPF savings.
It's too low?
2.5.
It's too low for you?
I believe so.
Okay.
Looking at those people who are earning 2.5 a month and above, a lot of us actually have insurance, and it takes up quite a bit, about 20% of your monthly income.
Okay.
So I was hoping that the government will allow financial industry to propose new financial products to help Singaporeans in this manner.
Would you like to see an increased rate of return on your CPF, just like what Dr. Hui suggested?
Yes. And it should be something similar to our healthcare system where everybody has to have some kind of a plan so that we can reduce the out-of-pocket expenses.
Okay, so that you're a partner in this process as well. Thank you for those suggestions. I appreciate that. We're going to go to Derek, who's standing by right now. Derek, hi.
Hi.
Thanks for calling us. What are your suggestions, Derek?
Yeah, I was actually going to suggest to say about education in a different form. I think when CPF was first instituted, it was meant to help folks who are less financially sound to actually have some retirement planning. And back then, the rate of return was actually decent, and I think a lot of people could actually foresee to retire on it. But as I mentioned, the ability is the rate of return is not high, significant limitations how you spend it, so people got to understand that this form of CPF may not be adequate for retirement planning, and that they should be aware of the other products that are available out there. I think that there's a big mindset change from the folks of the past who lived through in the 50s, 60s, who kind of seen some of this.
Okay.
And the folks today, mostly today, I think people use CPF to buy property. And for the most part right now, that's not adequate for retirement planning. And not to mention policy changes recently from the time you can take out lump sum,
so Derek,
now it's become an annuity.
Is the onus on us, the Singaporeans, then to seek out new options?
Yes, I think to put financial planning or retirement planning in the hands of just the government is very risky. I think everybody has responsibility to plan for their own future.
Thank you very much, Derek. I'm sorry, I'm going to have to leave it there for now, but I understand what you mean. Thank you so much for that suggestion. Very quickly, I'm going to cross over to Chikok. Chikok, those two callers are calling and looking for other options, financial planning, prudency in that respect, or coming up with new plans that tap on the existing schemes. What do you say to that?
I think that's great. The last two callers, Derek and earlier, Hazel and Jasmine, they all plan ahead. And it's always good to plan ahead. It's never too late to plan. And on planning, government does have assist program. But the last thing when we do planning is always to not to count on government assist program. We don't plan in that manner. We don't count on child support. Know whether your child will continue to support you. So you got to grab the bull by the hand, by the horn, and then plan for yourself what you're going to do 5 years later, 50 years later.
What about new plans that, like our last caller said, can tap onto the CPF rather than the 10-20% out of pocket from every month?
Yes, and I think CPF to a certain extent regulate what can be invested and not invested, and that's a good thing, because some of the funds and the program out there could be a bit could take on a bit more risk than what it's supposed to be, because a lot of us actually don't read in between the line or the fine print or the disclaimer. So one of the best thing is to seek a certified financial consultant. On that program.
Thank you very much for that. We're going to go to our last caller, Robert, who's standing by right now. Hi, Robert.
Yes, I'm here.
Robert, I'm sorry, I've got very little time. Can we go quickly with your comments, sir?
Yeah, I was listening to your panelists, and I fully agree with them. I think the prudency by the average Singaporean to get prepared their retirement is very good. My point is this: if we are prudent enough to plan for our retirement, then what's the point of CPF?
So would you rather a greater option to unlock CPF?
Yes, because if you are saying that everyone should be prudent to get a plan for their retirement, why don't the government just give me back my money and I'll plan for my retirement? Why do I need CPF?
Thank you very much,
CPF is
Robert.
there so that I don't have to plan for my retirement. It's supposed to help me.
As our last caller said, maybe that was the origin of why CPF started in the first place, right? Because a lot of people maybe didn't have that financial literacy. Thank you very much. Dr. Wee, let me come to you to end us off right there. Is that realistic to say that perhaps we don't need CPF?
Well, I don't think so, because not everyone has the time, nor the knowledge or the expertise to do their own financial planning. So people by default will leave it up to certain national system to help them in their planning. And I think CPF has done that adequately. The only problem, of course, is the leakage that is preventing retirement adequacy.
Right,
so
and
I think the system is
plug those leakages.
I think it's, you just need to plug the leakages. And at the same time, of course, we need to steer the nation away from this preoccupation with housing.
Kalyani, I'm going to end off with you right now. I'm sure many people do rely on the safety net, that is MediSave and MediFund, for example. What do you think? Do we live with CPF? Do we change it significantly?
I think the safety nets are very important because everyone at some point will go through a crisis, and we cannot foresee crisis. It cannot be predicted. So safety nets are there to help us when we are in a crisis, and sometimes we need some kind of helping hand to hold us up. So many a time people are not aware of the social services and the financial aid systems. So I think it's up to every Singaporean to know where they can go for help when they need it.
Thank you all for joining us on the panel today. That has been Talking Point. The vote wraps up our discussion tonight. And of course, many points came up about prudency, about financial literacy, about taking charge of the options at your hand, and most importantly, where you can go to find out more as well, to get advice. That's the thing about finding out at an early stage. That's your suggestions. We want to keep the discussion going on our Twitter feed at TP Vote, and of course on Facebook at channelnewsasia.com/TP. You can find all the links right there. I'm Daniel Martin. Thank you all for joining us. Good night.